Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Here to talk all things hockey are your hosts, Brad Crisco, Ryan Hanna, and Evan Lobsinger.
You're right, Brad. Dimitri did have the best line after that Seider fight with Forsberg. That was just a shampoo commercial.
A very effective shampoo commercial.
The hair flip at the end, like that was all scripted.
We were talking about it before the episode when Forsberg landed those first couple shots. I legitimately was worried Mo Seider was too pretty for this.
No, did you see the look on his face, man? He was an animal.
Oh, it took all of 1.5 seconds for me to realize I was wrong with that initial thought, and there were no concerns from that point on, but there was that brief moment.
I think the long hair is actually a strategic advantage because if he stays still, like if he leaves his head in the same spot, it'll just fall in front of his eyes. So he constantly has to be like bobbing and weaving to duck out of the way of the punches to keep the hair out of his face. It's pretty smart by Mo.
It's a defensive mechanism.
The look on his face though, like teeth bared, I was like, oh, he wants to kill Forsberg. This is nuts.
He almost did.
When he switched to the left, but the best part of that whole fight is like we're all losing it because we're watching Mo Seider in his first official fight as recorded, and you know, he's throwing some big punches. He switches to the left. He's beating the brakes off of Filip Forsberg. And the commentary, as Ken is calling out the punches, like pumped up like a boxing commentator, all you hear is Mick go, "Isn't this just a beautiful thing?"
He's not wrong.
We say it so often, but we're so lucky to have not just Ken Daniels, but Mickey Redmond. Like, Mick's, the little quips he throws in, it just makes everything. I almost fell over laughing when he was like, "Isn't this just a beautiful thing?" Like that man enjoyed that fight more than anyone else on the planet.
Well, every shampoo commercial needs its tagline.
Yeah. I'm glad we had that fight because that whole game was, I mean, not a terrible one from Detroit. Sucks that they lost, but a 1-0 game. That was probably the most exciting 1-0 game that you could have asked for in today's NHL.
In today's NHL, maybe. I've definitely seen better 1-0 games than that, though.
That's what you get with the stifling play of Nashville and what UC Saros was doing, but we'll jump into all of that. Folks, welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast, here to talk to you about all things Detroit Red Wings hockey, Seider's hands, Larkin's return, the world of the NHL, and lots more. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Hanna.
I'm Brad Crisco.
And I'm Evan.
On this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, we're going to be talking to you about Detroit's 2 games since the last time we spoke, a huge win over the New York Islanders that saw Captain Dylan Larkin return, as well as yesterday's 1-0 loss to the Nashville Predators, which was, you know, not a bad effort from Detroit, but still a 1-0 loss, the Seider fight, Alex Lyon's performance, and lots more. We're going to be talking to you about what's upcoming for Detroit, definitely their biggest game of the season so far, and leading into the playoff race. What's happening? What kind of help is Detroit getting? Spoiler, none. Thanks for nothing, Winnipeg. News from Red Wings prospects as Trey Augustine continues to excel at MSU. Sebastian Cossa continues to excel with the Grand Rapids Griffins. And more before we jump into some NHL news before overtime. Before all that, I want to let you know that the Winged Wheel Podcast is proudly supported by our Patreon supporters. Patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast to get such great benefits like being entered into all of our giveaways automatically. For example, we're giving away 2 tickets to every Detroit Red Wings home game, the vast majority going directly to our Patreon supporters. You also get access to our overtime bonus episodes, which record and post right after these main ones. Additionally, you get access to our Patreon exclusive Discord community, which is a fantastic community. So again, patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast. Also, some extra exciting news. We've been working with our friends over at the Grand Rapids Griffins and our limited edition Grand Rapids Griffins Winged Wheel Podcast hats, the one that Sebastian Cossa has been wearing, and he's been unreal ever since he started wearing it, and he wouldn't even sell to Carter Mazur for $50 or more, I think was the last bid. We are doing an additional limited run of them. The Grand Rapids Griffins are selling them. It's a very limited run, and this will be your last opportunity to get these specific hats. So if you go to wingedwheelpodcast.com/links, you can find the link to go to the Griffins site, and you'll have to buy a game ticket to the April 5th Grand Rapids Griffins game. And additionally, you'll get the Winged Wheel Podcast Grand Rapids Griffins co-branded cap. So again, wingedwheelpodcast.com/links, or go to the link in the description. Man, it was colossal. colossal to see Dylan Larkin skate out there with the Red Wings. Like, the entire atmosphere of the LCA changed. The entire vibe of the team changed. I know it's just one player, but when Dylan Larkin returned, you saw a lot of the cogs in the gears that were out of place for a long time kind of come back into place for the Red Wings. And I think from start to finish, that looked like their game against the New York Islanders.
It's crazy to see what I shouldn't say just inserting Dylan Larkin into the lineup does, but inserting Dylan Larkin into the lineup really kind of gets guys to fall into their more natural spot in the lineup that they should be at, playing less elevated minutes. And just having the guy who's the heart and soul of the team, like, it was totally palpable.
You could see he was pumped up too. I think he made a joke after. He's like, I think I maybe had too much pre-workout, but he was really geared up and ready to go.
Well, it looks like he had at least a couple scoops based on the way he played.
Can he give some to Alex DeBrincat? If one scoop of pre-workout gets you a goal, let's give DeBrincat some.
Well, DeBrincat's smaller. We got to be careful with how we portion this out.
Yeah, 3/4 of a scoop.
Yeah, 2 might kill him.
I got to tell you though, Larkin, yeah, up and down the lineup. You're right, Evan. The effect was even beyond just the guys that Larkin was playing with. A 6-3 win for the Red Wings, and that was a critical one. Ken Daniels was on Jeff Merrick's show, and he described it as the most important game played in the LCA to date in terms of the implications of the game. And I think he was right. You know, that game put some distance between Detroit and the Islanders, and it gave them a little miniature buffer in case things didn't go their way in a future game day, which was, Saturday. And Detroit got the job done in regulation. Scoring opened with Christian Fischer on the breakaway on Sorokin. Christian Fischer on the breakaway against Elias Sorokin. Did you guys see the pregame stats where Sorokin and Reimer have comparable stats this season?
Oh, no.
Yeah. Hey, many people are saying this.
And these two teams sit outside the playoffs right now. I wonder why.
You can see why sometimes there's almost an irrational amount of conversation, even from us, about goaltending for the future, because that's for another time. Christian Fischer opened scoring. The Islanders tied the game, and then Detroit went up 2-1 with 4 minutes left as the Copp, Fischer, Rasmussen line. They had a night, and actually it was a great play from Ben Sherratt to get the puck in front. Andrew Copp ended up scoring his first goal in about 21 games, and it wasn't even his only goal that game. And then, which was exciting, and I think that line would have been the story of the game, but then it had to happen. You knew it had to happen. Alex DeBrincat finds Dylan Larkin in front. Larkin fires at home, and everyone jumped out of their seats.
That was one of the top moments of the Red Wings season. If you had to just isolate a moment, that's top 3 at worst.
Yeah. I don't think it's quite Kane winning in overtime against the Blackhawks, but it was up there. And you can see how much it meant for Larkin, too. His celebration was... Max Bultman wrote in his article for The Athletic Detroit after, Larkin gestured to the LCA crowd to stand up to celebrate, and they obliged, or something to that effect. Much more eloquent than I just butchered it, but I got pumped up again reading it after that. Simon Edvinsson had a huge keep. He made a lot of really big plays that game, but he had a huge keep. He used his reach to stop the puck at the blue line. The same kind of things we saw Moritz Seider start to do when he came onto the scene, but Edvinsson's keep at the blue line kind of kept that play going and eventually got the puck in. And then Perron actually earlier in the sequence did some really nice work behind the net too. But great display of how Edvinsson can already be making an impact, and is.
There was another moment on the Larkin goal other than when Edvinsson kept it in where he actually engaged down low, got the puck, started going back up the half wall and cycled it down low, and that led to the Larkin goal. I mean, a few more people had to put some effort in, but man, to see him come in and start doing stuff like that is excellent and exciting to watch.
We talked about it too, I think last episode, but his breakout passes and his various elements of the game that, some of the Red Wings can do, but to be able to get that from him already is he's already making an impact. These aren't his first NHL games. Of course, he's had a few, dips in the water here and there, but he's coming in at a big moment in the season. And it's not easy pressure-wise to do what he's doing. And he's being asked to do a lot. He's playing a lot of minutes. They're not hiding him. They're asking him to do a job here, especially as Wallman's out. he has to seize this moment, and he knows the context too. Like, if Detroit makes a run of this, if Detroit goes into the playoffs, he's going to want to stay up. And he's kind of checking the box of what Steve Yzerman said in his presser after the deadline, which is, if these guys perform as I call them up, then they're going to stay because we need to win right now. And I think he's a part of it. Has he been flawless? No. People are quick to point that out, and that's fine. It's fair. No defenseman in his position would be flawless. Remember Moritz Seider's rookie season where he won the Calder. He was absolutely not flawless. He was good for one or two. Yeah, that's a rookie. Mistakes, probably a game, but you're seeing a lot of things that you really, really like from Simon Edvinsson right now.
Simply put, he can just do things other guys on this blue line can't. And if you're a contending team or your team in a playoff race, do those plays, those things he can do, outweigh the mistakes he's going to make. For most contending teams and playoff teams, it's a maybe. It really, really depends because, some of the mistakes can be quite impactful. On this team right now, no, because the veterans are making bigger mistakes than he does. So it's a good situation for him selfishly because in my mind, there's no risk of him going down. He's firmly been at worst third best defenseman on this team since he's been called back up. And yeah, he's right. They need wins. So you're not going to weaken the blue line by taking him out of it unless he nosedives in the next few weeks.
They can continue to ride him in terms of minutes. So, if they started to scale that back, it'd be like, okay, maybe there are some things in his game that they don't like at the NHL level, but it seems like he keeps hanging around the 20-minute mark. So that's a clear indication to me that the coaching staff has all the confidence in him and they need him in the game to win and stay in the playoff hunt.
I actually forgot to mention, but that was the first time I think in 8 games where the Red Wings scored the opening goal.
Well, the Red Wings are 3-7 in their last 10, so that's not the most shocking stat.
No, yeah, that's just like one of those rollover stats from the fact that they've just been terrible for the last while. So, did you guys see the intermission interview? Christian Fischer with Trevor Thompson. Trevor Thompson was asking him about the impact of Larkin's goal, and
getting him fired up.
Yeah, Christian Fischer practically had tears in his eyes, like, oh, Larkin's such a beaut. You can see what he means to this team. Like, drops an F-bomb right away, goes, oh, and then apologizing at the end of the interview. Was like, oh, sorry, Mom, for swearing.
Then he kind of ran away.
Trev's cracking up.
I know, it was great.
That's the good stuff. Fischer's I'm very hesitant to talk too much about it because anytime I endear myself to a depth player, a depth player who's impactful, things always go wrong or they leave the team or, I said a lot of nice things about Klim Kostin and he no longer even is in Detroit. But Christian,
he's playing great.
Didn't he get hurt? He got cut by a skate recently or something?
Did he really? I missed that. I saw he had a bunch of goals.
Oh, yeah. He immediately started scoring points in San Jose. But Christian Fischer, Jordan Keller actually pointed this out, but he has big Maltby vibes. And I kind of like that comparison in terms of what he brings to the team. I hope Fischer stays. I love the impact he makes on this team.
Yeah, it's just going to be a question of if he gets priced out or not, because as we've talked about at length, you don't pay for depth.
Yeah, if he can stay for cheaper, you can see easily why Arizona fans were upset to see him go.
Oh, 100%.
The Red Wings came back from intermission and things kept going for them. The Copp, Fischer, Rasmussen line. Again, Edvinsson started the play. Rasmussen brought the puck down the right side. Fischer got the shot in front and Andrew Copp buried the rebound. Copp scored his second goal of the game, which was huge, and Detroit was up 4-1. And at that point, you really kind of felt that this was Detroit's game. Not that anything was guaranteed. It was another one of those games where, Reimer did what he needed to do. It wasn't always pretty, but he did what he needed to do. Patrick Kane scored to make it 5-1 after Gostisbehere rung it around the boards. DeBrincat won the race to get the puck, and then 2-on-1 with Kane, DeBrincat to Kane. Even though DeBrincat's not scoring right now, the playmaking is there, and he's creating chances, and that was no mistake as Kane scored his 16th. Already 16 goals for Kane.
That would have led the Red Wings in how many years in the rebuild?
Let's not talk about that. The Islanders actually got 2 on the board. Not that there was no concern, but to me, it didn't really feel like they were mounting a comeback in the game. And then
you must be new here.
I think there was just really nice weather that day, and I was just probably excited about Dylan Larkin returning. And speaking of which, who else to get the empty net goal but Dylan Larkin, assisted by Lucas Raymond, second goal of the game to make it 6-3, and that sealed it for Detroit. It had to be Larkin again. You knew from about the red line as Larkin found him breaking out of the zone. It's almost unfair to Fischer, Copp, and Rasmussen because Larkin's the story of that game.
So you're right in the sense that they should have got a lot more attention, but even their success is a product of Larkin.
Yeah.
Because you put Larkin back on the first line and the rest of the team slots in a more appropriate part of the lineup. We don't have number one center Joe Veleno, with all due respect to Joe Veleno.
Yeah,
it's a cascade effect that has more of an impact than, your average hockey fan would likely realize. It's like, oh yeah, you're missing your best player. That's going to hurt that line. No, it hurts every line because everybody has to slot up. Guys get pulled off of lines. This was an effective line for a long period, for a long stretch. Not going to score a ton of goals, but as we've seen, they can do it. Their defensive acumen is obviously the reason they play together, but when you can get it a little bit at both ends of the ice, that's huge. And we've now seen two combinations between DeBrincat, Kane, Larkin, which I want to see for the rest of the season, as the top line, and then the Rasmussen line as the third line, and then you can juggle in between that.
I love Jared Goff. I love what he's done for Detroit. I love how he's really embraced this role and grown as a quarterback in Detroit when a lot of people thought, he was just going to be a contract dump eventually. I love how Detroit rallied around him for the Lions run. I'm glad that the chant this time around was for Dylan Larkin's name. Like, he deserved that. Like, that guy, this is his team, the Michigan man leading this team and coming back, and you don't want to say saving the day because it's probably a bit dramatic, but kind of saving the day in a must-win game for the Red Wings. Dylan Larkin deserved his own chant.
The way they were playing, I think saving the day is actually correct.
Yeah.
Lucas Raymond was doing his best to save the day, and for most of the games, it still wasn't enough. So he needed some help.
Did you guys see the size of that octopus that got thrown on the ice after the game? That thing was huge.
I love it, but
that thing could eat a child.
It tried eating a catfish.
Oh, no, that was the Nashville. But after the game in Detroit, like right at the glass, this lady had this octopus and she pulled it out of the bag. I was like, oh my God, that thing's massive. I think if you don't boil to prepare it, when you boil it, it loses a lot of the size. I'm like, that thing's colossal.
Oh. Disgusting. People are freaks.
We love those freaks, though. Massive win for Detroit in the playoff race. I know people don't like the term, but I'm sorry, it is what it is. That was must win. That was must win considering who they were playing, the point in the season, and making sure that they were not just still in the race, but even that performance. You need to know that you can put up that performance with Larkin back. If Larkin came back and the team still looked in disarray, you wouldn't have thrown in the white flag because you were like, oh, okay, maybe Larkin just needs some time. But, big sigh of relief when you saw that the team could actually play how they were playing in January and February.
First goal of the game, not insignificant because we know how they've been starting games. So that was a pretty good indication that, at least from a mindset, motivation standpoint, whatever you want to call it, maybe they're back. Maybe that's going to be a regular thing now.
Maybe. And jumping ahead for a quick second, even though they lost, I still saw a lot that I liked in Nashville. So maybe. More from the Islanders game, though. First of all, beating Patrick Waugh, always a great tradition for the Red Wings. I am happy that they're still doing that. But the Patrick Waugh pulling the goalie with 5:35 left, it was hysterical when Ken was calling it. He's like, and Patrick Waugh is really the one who brought into the league pulling the goalie early. 6-ish minutes left or just under 6 minutes. I don't know. It might be too close in the playoff race to put. Oh, there he goes.
That timing was phenomenal.
That was immaculate. But anyways, eat your heart out, Patrick Waugh. All right, Detroit then played the Nashville Predators. And I'm going to preface this with some optimism because the way we were talking leading into this stretch of Islanders, Predators, and then on Tuesday, Washington, I thought if you're going to drop points, if you have to drop points, the Predators are the least impactful team. Because one, they're the hottest team in the NHL right now. Watching that team play, I was like, someone in the West who's going to win a division is going to have to face the Nashville Predators and UC Saros in the first round, and that's kind of sick. Like, that's a little bit of a joke.
They've already made a Cup final run as an 8 seed, so it's right up their alley. I mean, you look at their roster on paper, and you have to assume it's not going to hold up forever, but they are playing some sound hockey right now.
A big part of the playoffs is being hot at the right time.
And UC Saros.
And being hot at the right time and having a goalie who's hot at the right time. Anyhow, if you had to drop points, not the Islanders, definitely not Washington, Nashville. So to me, the 1-0 results, and as I just said, like, it's based on their performance, it's not the end of the world. But still unfortunate, Detroit came in Saturday. They were trying to ride a lot of the momentum from Thursday. You can see, I think right away, Larkin picked up whatever bug has been going around the dressing room, so he was under the weather. But and ultimately a 1-0 loss to the Predators. We'll talk more about the Seider fight in a moment, but that was a game where Alex Lyon came in. He had a big test. I think he did a monster job, stopped all but one shot, and that was not his fault. And the offense was completely stifled by Nashville up until like the last 2 minutes, pretty much. A few spurts here and there, but Nashville was, when they did get past Nashville's defense, UC Saros was just unchallenged.
Yeah, it was one of those, we'll call it stereotypical Red Wings games of last year, where they had that emphasis of, okay, we know this team sucks, but we're going to button up defensively. We're going to show we can defend. And they did. And they were comically bad and ineffective on offense all season. That's what this game was. They did not generate much of quality at all. Saros was good, but he didn't even need to be great up until the last 5 minutes of the game.
Yeah.
And, you know, for every compliment I have about the Red Wings' defensive structure and defensive strategy for this game, I have an equal criticism for the offensive game plan, because they did a great job. Nashville wasn't getting a ton either. Not a lot was happening in this game, which as a road team is not a bad thing. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of what a lot of coaches preach. You know, go in there, smother them, bore them to death. We'll capitalize on a mistake. Like, we have to get them off their game in their barn.
Especially for a team that was coming in on a 16-game point streak.
Yeah, and Detroit did a great job of that. The part they missed was capitalizing on anything. Mm-hmm. And I would have liked to have seen a change in at least transition strategy, offensive strategy. Whatever you're doing when Nashville had the puck, great. You were doing it awesome. Don't change a thing. But you got to try something else at some point, because the last few minutes of the game proved you could do it. They were all over them and could have easily had 3 or 4 goals with just a little bit better luck. And that's the part that always gets me, because, you know, the team's defense, by and large, has been the biggest problem this season. And I've been sitting here all year saying they need offense, they need a top 6 forward, they need another center. And they're like, yeah, okay, but have you seen the defense? You can coach defense. You can't teach goals. And this was a game where it really, really shone that this team is still really lacking in, we'll call it, natural offensive talent.
This isn't, I want to put a pin in this and let's save that concept that you just raised for the offseason, because I think this is going to be a classic Brad versus Ryan offense versus defense mentality fight, but that's for maybe a different episode. But all in all, I agree. I think you had a game where the defense, by and large, except for a moment, did what they needed to do. And your goalie who's been struggling recently, did everything he needed to do, essentially. And you couldn't come through. I don't have a lot of concern long term about this for as long as the season extends, hopefully into the playoffs, but even for just these last 11 or so games, I'm not too worried about the offense. I think some tweaks, like you just mentioned, Brad, like breakout structure, I think it's been mentioned, and I fully agree, Larkin, DeBrincat, Kane, because if you get DeBrincat going, the floodgates open. We've seen that so many times with the Red Wings. DeBrincat's been creating offense in terms of playmaking, and on the power play he's been there, but 5-on-5 scoring is obviously not there right now, and it hasn't been for a long time. If you can unlock DeBrincat, I think so much of what you're saying is missing comes through in the Red Wings. But I don't know, it's definitely not good that the offense wasn't there this game. I'm just happy to have seen an effort where they were able to hang with what is probably the hottest team in the NHL for that long.
that's the difference between us now and years past, but we're talking about holding the hottest team in the league to 1 goal and talking about all the positives and all the minor changes that can be made. Yeah, I didn't hate the Red Wings performance all that much, but I mean, not scoring is not great.
No.
You're not going to get a whole lot. If you make the playoffs, you're not going to get a whole lot of power play opportunities in the playoffs, so you have to be generating at 5-on-5.
I don't know if
I'm not going to hang my hat on this game and say, there's still trouble brewing. We knew what the Red Wings were getting into with the Nashville Predators this weekend. To lose 1-0 and give up 1 goal in the last essentially 5 minutes of the game that determined it, I'm not going to call it the season right then and there.
I think I'm quoting you, Brad, but you might have said something during the game of this is the difference between good teams and great teams, because Detroit had a good game, but Nashville had they did that extra little bit to break through, and they made it great. Detroit did really well to hang in with a tough team. They did really well to hang in, against a team that would have had every right to steamroll them based on how Detroit's been recently. But that game was a playoff style game. Playoff games aren't always all fun, all offense, 7-6, you might see across the league. A lot of playoff games are grindy. It's just about whoever can make one less mistake or break through one more time. And that's ultimately what it was. I think of 2 moments in this game. Earlier in the game, there was a scramble in front of Nashville's net. Detroit was getting opportunities left and right. Saros was, having to swim all over the place, much like Lyon was on the goal that Detroit ended up allowing. And the puck kind of came out to the high slot area or the top of the circles. And Jeff Petrie had to make a split-second decision to either move up and engage with the puck and throw it back into the fray or make a pass or take a shot. Or did he think the Nashville players were going to come out and beat him to the puck and he didn't want to get burned for, a break going the other way? Obviously, we have the luxury of the overhead view, but the move there was to continue the pressure, move up, and throw the puck back into the mayhem. He double clutched. He second guessed himself. He ended up floating backwards and essentially allowed possession for Nashville and kind of diffused the sequence, and Nashville got away unscathed. On the other hand, the goal that Detroit allowed, where Lyon was having to make saves with and without a stick, he was all over the net. He did everything he could. He made some huge saves that would have been, if Detroit won the game, that would have been all over the highlight reels. But essentially every Red Wings player, just for a moment, just for 10 seconds, they were doing something somewhat wrong. Nashville capitalized, Forsberg scored, and that was it.
Difference between good teams and great teams. Nashville capitalized on one of the very few Red Wings mistakes. And when the Red Wings made a mistake, albeit a pretty significant one that I'll chalk up to ice conditions, but a pretty bad turnover from Christian Fischer exiting the zone, instead of keeping composure and keeping to a system and doing what you need to do, just diffuse the giveaway, it turned into an absolute fire drill where everybody, like you said before the episode, was just lost.
Yeah.
And had no idea what to do. Petrie's defending nothing. Rasmussen at one point has the puck directly in front of him and continues to try and box out a player in the slot, which
and these are guys who have been, as a line, incredibly effective.
Yeah, this is the line you would want out in a defensive situation. And just, there were so many little things that happened on the play that I can't understand what they were trying to do beyond full panic had set in their head. And it was just constant repeating over of crap.
It's how it felt watching it. Just that one moment, Nashville went up 1-0. Detroit for the last 2 minutes had incredible pressure, amazing pressure, but ultimately it wasn't enough. So that was a 1-0 game. Obviously, again, not great to drop those points, but let's talk about something positive here. Moritz Seider. It isn't just being tough and throwing big hits. We haven't seen him do it as much this season. But Filip Forsberg wanted it. Much like at the end of December, there was a scrum and Roman Josi and Alex DeBrincat had a hold of each other, and Roman Josi was laughing in DeBrincat's face because DeBrincat wanted to go, and Josi was like, yeah, whatever. Josi dropped his gloves first and then got fed his lunch. And DeBrincat he had some good uppercuts in there, if I remember correctly. And you're like, that was a really, first of all, hilarious. DeBrincat pummeling Josi for a quick second. And then Yosi's like, he was lost. He was like, what just happened? And you're like, why would a star player on Nashville do that to a Red Wings player that just never fights? And then they got, fed. Forsberg did the same thing. He did the exact same thing. He wanted it against Seider. They dropped the gloves. And for, like you said at the top of the show, Brad, like for a few seconds there, Forsberg held his own. He threw some punches where you're like, oh, is this Seider, kind of learning how a fight's different than a scrum? And then Seider just started throwing bombs.
He's a quick learner.
Man. And then he switched to his left. And when he switched to his left, he made some contact. Like if he was like an actual fighter and like really, really, really knew how to fight, the way he connected on those, if he got some more power behind those, Forsberg would have been out.
It was, dare I say it, almost boxing style of fight. Because when he'd pop Forsberg with an overhand, and then Forsberg would go, oh, I don't like that. And he would duck to get out of the way of that punch. And Seider would come under and uppercut him as he was down. And it went back and forth like that a few times. And Forsberg had no way to escape this beating.
Mickey was right. It was a beautiful thing. Like that. Yeah, they lost the game. But they lost the war, but they did win that one battle.
Yeah.
They absolutely won that one battle. That was credit to you, Mo Seider. And, Mo Seider kind of gets an extra shove after the whistle a lot. And you can see teams really target him. And I think in his first year, he would have been a lot more apt to or want to kind of get in the fray and mix it up a bit. Not fighting really, but a lot of small tussles and scrums. And then you saw him as he's tried to focus, he has a job to do on the ice. If he's not there, the whole zoo breaks out and all hell breaks loose. So he kind of is almost like a pacifist. You can see he's almost annoyed when players are shoving him. He's like, yeah, do what you need to do. Like, we're not doing this. And to see that like animal come out, I think that was good to see. And I think players around the league will notice that too.
Very Simon Edvinsson-esque, I'd
yes.
say.
Yeah. Edvinsson's like, all right, if you want to do this.
If you want this smoke.
Oh, you want to do the find out part? Okay.
He's about to start his Matt Rempe World Tour.
I could do without the Mo Seider, black eye part of it. That would be good. Okay. We are going to jump into the playoff race and standings in a moment, but first we're going to take a quick break to let you know that this episode of the Winged Wheel podcast is proudly brought to you by Labatt Blue Light. Created in 1983, this premium light Canadian Pilsner is a delicately balanced beer brewed with Cascade hops and a blend of malt. It's fresh, crisp, and brewed to the highest quality standards. There's a little bit of Canadian kindness in every sip of Labatt Blue Light. How did it get in there? They're Canadian. That's how. You can spread the love yourself by sharing a Labatt. And when you do share a Labatt, you're not just sharing a beer. You're sharing an experience that'll pair with anything from hockey to a hoedown. So next time you're watching a hockey with your buds, be sure to share a Labatt, because while you might not all root for the same team, although we on this podcast do hope you're rooting for the Red Wings, you can all enjoy a Labatt Blue Light. We honestly love going to games in Detroit and seeing Labatt being the beer that fans clamor for all over the arena. It's a reliable beer and great to have in your hand when celebrating a goal. So head to the link in the description of this episode or the one you see on your screen to find Labatt in stores near you today. You must be 21 or older, and as always, enjoy responsibly. Okay, welcome back. Let's jump into the playoff race, and it really is crunch time now. 71 games played for Detroit, 11 games left. We are getting into the territory of, even though things aren't mathematically must win, you're getting about as close as you can get without it being, quite there. Thanks to the Winnipeg Jets giving Detroit no help, 2 consecutive days of losing in regulation to the Islanders and then the Capitals. Detroit is currently out of a playoff spot at the time of recording. The Capitals won today. They are 7-3 in their last 10. They're getting hot at the right time. They have a game in hand on Detroit, and they're already 1 point ahead. So that is where Detroit is at right now. And this Tuesday game against Washington, in Washington with the Capitals on fire, is that must win.
Absolutely, it's a must win. Not only because it's the team you're directly competing with. Look at the Red Wings' next 2 games after that, Carolina and Florida. You cannot lose to Washington because you might go 0-3 this week. And Washington is going to win 1 or 2 more, but the way they've been going, somehow, even though they sold at the deadline, it's
their goal differential.
It's like minus almost 30 or something.
Even with this run, they're still at negative 27. Detroit, I mean, Detroit was a positive 21 or 22 goal differential at one point. They went on their losing streak, and they're still positive 6. They're 33 goals better than the Capitals this year.
Washington had some obscene record like 16-2-4 in 1-goal games. They either win a 1-goal game or they get blown out. There's no in between. Remember the last time the Red Wings played them? 8-3 loss for the Capitals. There's no in between. So this game's either 7-2 for the Red Wings or 2-1 for the Caps.
That's what Detroit needs to do. Like the performance they had last time. If you guys remember that win, it wasn't just that it was a big number for Detroit. It was that they beat Washington up and down the ice handily. At no point in that game did Washington think that they were going to be in it. There's no fight. There's no, pushback. That was Detroit's through and through. They need to have that same kind of performance. The same thing they did to the Islanders on Thursday. Like they need to come in and make a statement against the Capitals, because when they're not playing the Red Wings, the Capitals have done everything they need to do and more. And now Detroit, based on that and their losing streak, they're in a position to score watch, and it's not going their way right now.
Yeah, they still don't control their own destiny, even if they win that game, because they would leapfrog Washington. But Washington would have a game in hand still. So they still need to win that game, and then they still need some help. And then Detroit's likely going to have to take one of the 2 games between Carolina and Florida, which seems like a very tall task. Although Carolina just lost to Washington, so thanks for no help there either.
What's going on? Here's the thing. Like, I won't even say Detroit's getting unlucky, because when Detroit was lucky? When they went on that losing streak, 8 of 9 or whatever it was, in most years, someone would have run away with it. The right team in and around Detroit, because there's a lot of teams there who could have really pushed them out. No one who had the opportunity, stepped on them and ran away with this. So Detroit came out of that still in the mix. Part of that was their doing. They had the 8-point cushion, but that was Detroit's luck. What they're seeing now is what you can count on. Like, Detroit has to count on Washington to win every game that they need to win moving forward. Detroit has to count on the powerhouses from elsewhere in the league to not win when Detroit needs them to win. So as much as it's not like they need some luck, Detroit needs to kind of create their own luck here and take care of things when they can. And if you have a chance for a 4-point swing, that's when you have to do it.
Yeah, the Red Wings need a bare minimum of 2 wins this week, and one of them has to be Washington.
Yeah. If it's not, again, is it mathematically over? No. But things have to go incredibly well Detroit's way, both in Red Wings games and outside of Red Wings games.
Also, we should add that the Wings are on the road all week. So
yeah,
the Wings are statistically far better of a team, like most teams are, but by and large, much better at home than they are on the road.
Yeah.
And we know how the last road trip went.
We don't talk about that. And it's a 5-game road trip. Nashville kicked it off, and then Detroit has the Capitals on Tuesday. We'll be back with you on Wednesday to talk about what happens that game. And then after that, as Brad mentioned, it's Carolina on the road on Thursday, a matinee against the Panthers on Saturday. We'll be back with you after that on Sunday. And then the road trip finishes on Monday, April 1st against the Tampa Bay Lightning in Florida. So hopefully that's an April Fool's Day for Tampa Bay, not Detroit. And then Detroit has a few days off before being back at the LCA. So this last stretch, like, I know a meal is made of Washington's strength of schedule. Like, they have a lot of tough teams. To me, I'm like, they're beating them. And it's not like Detroit's is easy either. Like, as you mentioned, Brad, Carolina, Florida, Tampa, you have the Rangers later. You have the Capitals again. And it should be mentioned that Detroit has the Capitals one more time on Tuesday, April 9th, and that's in Detroit. So it's not like that's their last opportunity to get 2 points off of them, but Detroit has a tough test here. If they're going to make this, they're going to have to earn it. The good news is they're still in a position to earn it. And the good news is, to me, and I said this in the chat with you guys, after the win against the Islanders and based on how they performed, even in a game where they weren't perfect against the Predators, I see enough of the January, February Red Wings in those performances to feel optimistic that this still could happen. Whether it happens, like, it's not long odds, but it'll be a tough task, but Detroit could still do it.
Yeah, it's a weird split on their schedule for the rest of the season too, because obviously, as we mentioned a few times here, their last quote-unquote winnable game might be Washington, because then Carolina, Florida, Tampa, Rangers. Even if the Red Wings are running hot, I don't think we can expect the Red Wings to win any one of those games individually. Now, the way the NHL works, you probably get one or two of those because even good teams have off nights, and we've seen the Red Wings do that a bunch this year. But statistically speaking, they're not going to be the favorites. But then after that, the only top team they have for the remainder of the season is Toronto. They got Montreal for the last 2 games of the season. They got Buffalo and Pittsburgh in the second last week of the season. They got Washington again. So this could be a weird scenario where they fall more out of the race, but then all of a sudden, run hot to finish the season, at least based on strength of schedule.
This is going to go down to the wire in all likelihood, which is, this is exactly what we asked for preseason. Like, if Detroit's playing meaningful games, we're talking about this at the end of March right now. This is a dream scenario, ignoring like how the up and downs went all year. But yeah, it's going to go down to the wire. We'll see how it goes. It's never easy to say, like, draw conclusions from just one game before the next episode. But if you had to pick one game to draw a lot of conclusions from, carefully, it's Detroit versus Washington on Tuesday. Elsewhere in the world of the Red Wings, let's jump into some news with Detroit's goalie prospects. They're staying hot. The Michigan State Spartans beat Michigan in a overtime win for the Big Ten Championship. They stopped Michigan's winning streak as Big Ten champions, and Trey Augustine, and Red Savage, credit to him too, should be recognized as well, but Trey Augustine, clutch performance, clutch season, was named most outstanding player of the game, and Michigan State won the title. But man, what a year for Trey Augustine. A dream season. After the Red Wings took Trey Augustine in the second round, we talked about it. Like, that's actually a pick that a lot of us were a fan of because he's a goalie who had a world of potential. And what else could you have asked for this year?
Yeah, we didn't love that second round, but that was the pick we liked, because the perfect time to swing on a goalie is in a second round when you have 3 picks. We all know goalies are voodoo. We were talking about Sorokin versus Reimer this year. But if you can get a good goalie who is consistent, and a couple years of an ELC might not hurt, that's huge.
Elsewhere, actually, did you see he was interviewed and they asked him, they said, "Oh, your teammates say you're unflappable. Like, you're so calm." And his quote was, "I don't ever panic." That's cold. That's cold as hell.
I'd like to hear that from your goaltending prospects.
You, of all positions where you need a guy to be cocky and really to be a pro athlete, like, you have to think that you can on any given night be the best player on the ice. That's
like Filip Zadina.
He walked away from a lot of money, And for goalies, that's the biggest position where you need a guy to just believe that he can take over a game, because it's the most mental position. And if you believe in yourself, that's 75% of your game right there. Detroit's other goalie prospect, who is further up the road in terms of development for the Red Wings, Sebastian Cossa, continues his streak of points, not, goals or assists, but where when he's in net, the Griffins get a point in that game, to 15 games. The Griffins won 4-3 over the Rockford Ice Hogs. So Cossa, since he started wearing the Winged Wheel podcast hat, no, I'm kidding, but ever since he kind of really found his form and got his legs as the season went on, he has been lights out, to the point where the chorus of people asking for Cossa in Detroit, which I still think it's too soon, is growing louder because he's making a statement in Grand Rapids.
Yeah, it's important to keep the when he's ready in the back of your mind, because he's playing great, but he's still got points in these games where he's making saves because he's athletic, not because his fundamentals are fully succeeding there. There was a save he made in the Rockford game where it was just a guy went backhand forehand on a breakaway. Cossa bit hard, way harder than a goalie in that situation should, but he still got over and got a leg on it because he's that freaky of an athlete.
He's an athletic freak, and he's big.
Yeah, exactly. Big, athletic. Give him another year or two to refine the fundamentals so he doesn't have to make those saves all that often. And yeah, you could have a legitimate superstar on your hands.
It's good to see that he still, wasn't too rattled by the fact that we worked at the Griffins to break up his black market dealing ring of these co-branded caps. Because we did secure one for Carter Mazer, Luff, and anyone else who wants one. Okay, let's jump into some NHL news here. Tom Wilson slashed a guy in the face and got suspended for 6 games. We didn't mention that before, but Detroit's going to face Washington without Tom Wilson. They've already done well without him, winning games, but he slashed Noah Gregor in the face in a move where you saw it and you're like, how could that have been an accident? But evidently in the moment he was apologizing and it was an accident. Still, Tom Wilson obviously has a history of, a lot of reprimands, suspensions, what have you, in the NHL. So that's where you get the 6-game suspension from. But what a weird play.
It's one of two things. We'll never know the answer. Only Tom himself knows the answer. Either he meant to do it, and he got 6 games for the malicious act, or for some reason, I don't understand what he would have been trying to do, but we'll say it was an accident. 6 games is paying the stupid tax.
It is you have to be responsible for your stick. You're going to take a guy's chiclets out. Like, you can't be swinging your stick like that. I don't understand why you would be swinging your stick like that in the play in that moment anyways. I do believe that probably before his stick made contact, he had regrets about what he was doing and was sorry before he even took the guy's teeth out. But what an idiotic move.
Like, normally there's I would pay money to have been in that hearing to just ask the question and hear the answer of why. We'll give you the benefit of the doubt. We know you're going to tell us it was an accident. What were you trying to do then? Whip your stick over his head to get your second hand on it? Like, what was the play here?
I think whatever he did, he said the right things and he apologized and acknowledged the mistake. Same as in the moment where he was apologizing to Gregor, like apologized in the hearing and took responsibility. I've heard about guys who have gone into those hearings in a situation where they were definitely at fault and just fought it way too much. And that affected where they kind of came down on the scale. I think he got the lower end of the scale based on his history and the action itself. I think they could have justified giving him 10 games.
No, well, we got to go off the precedent of the last time someone slashed someone in the face, which was not even 2 months ago. And poor Jacob Trouba had to suffer through the maximum allowable fine.
That's what I want to just very quickly point out is like, yes, you suspend someone who's irresponsible with their stick, even if it was an accident, if you buy that in the moment and they showed regret about it, whatever. Trouba should have gotten more.
What Tom Wilson got was closer to what actually should be the precedent for this action. I still can't wrap my head around Trouba's. He slapped a guy in the face, got nothing. And then another guy does it who's not Jacob Trouba and admittedly has a reputation. 6 games. I'm good with 6 games. But yeah, the league's consistency continues to be baffling.
Hopefully they're moving in the correct direction with these things.
They have been showing an ability to kind of come down on things that were egregious more, which is good. Which I'm a fan of that at the very least. Okay, elsewhere in the NHL, we talked about Washington and how they're hot. We talked about Washington and how they're going to be without Tom Wilson. Washington and Alex Ovechkin in his chase of Wayne Gretzky's goal record, he is now within 50. Everyone's kind of back on he's doing this, right?
I think so. He's got a couple of years left on his contract. He's at 26 goals this year already. So even if he doesn't score another goal the rest of the season, he needs to average 24 per season over the next 2 seasons. If you want to say, hey, can a guy in his late 30s average that? Well, he did it this year. And I'm sure there'll be a little bit of regression next year and the year after that. That's how it works. But he's also got a bunch of games left and he's on an absolute heater. We've seen what happens to Detroit when guys come in on heaters like this. Let's just say I think Ovechkin's probably going to have a few less to go in his quest come Tuesday night. But
no. Whenever there's a storyline against Detroit, man, and that's just a function of being a bad team for so long is like, you're a soft target, but so annoying.
Yeah, hopefully we win 4-3 because Ovechkin's getting at least 2. I think everybody listening to this doesn't even need me to say this. We all know we've been hurt before. We've been through this before. But Red Wings storyline aside and Capital's success aside, I hope so. Like, this is fun. When was the last time the NHL had a chase like this on anything?
Oh, and this is like arguably, I don't think Gretzky's point record is going to be touched.
No, never.
Unless we enter a crazy different era in the NHL where scoring makes today's scoring look like nothing. It's not going to be touched. A lot of people would have thought this record was untouchable.
Yeah, 215 points in a season. never getting touched. 92 goals in a season, never getting touched. Like you said, the point totals, never getting touched. The only significant record that might ever fall again is this. And again, you're right. I don't think a lot of people thought it was possible. But here we are with a guy who he's slowing down, but still might hit 30 goals at, what is he now, going to be 38 or is already 38? Like
He's 38 now.
So he's going to be 39 later this year. It's crazy.
He has 8 goals in his last 5 games too. So, he can get hot at any point. And he doesn't play that game anymore where he needs any sort of skating ability to score. He just sits in his office and gets fed one-timers.
I also, you get the impression that Ovi's not, it's not that he doesn't take it seriously, but Sidney Crosby is one of the most dedicated players to his game and being in shape and being prepared that we've seen in the modern era of the NHL. You look at Nathan MacKinnon's work habits, he got that from Sidney Crosby. He learned from him. Not that Ovi doesn't, I'm not going to say Ovi doesn't try. He's the greatest goal scorer of all time. Obviously he tries, but I wonder how much of his coming into the season is to be NHL game ready at your age. You got to even work harder than you did when you were 27, 28. And so he's probably had to face it this year that whatever he did in the offseason didn't cut it. That's why it took him a while to find his legs. And that's why, if he wants to change anything, I don't know, Ovi's the biggest F it, we ball attitude of any player in the NHL probably, but I could see him not having this poor of a start again next season if he just works at his offseason differently.
It could be, but the screw it, we ball attitude he's got. I seen an interview with Daniel Sprong, and he was talking about his time in Washington. And I guess Ovi had a saying for him before every game, and as they were in the tunnel, before they came out, he'd go up to Spronger and he'd be like, "Don't think, babe, just shoot." It's the most Ovi quote ever, and I love it so much.
Has Ovi ever really stopped celebrating his cup win?
No,
I don't think so.
No, but also one of the things too on that note that, Ovi doesn't get enough credit for, I don't think, at least as a leader, as a captain. And Sprong was really, really attesting to this, goes, he's just as happy when you score. It's not just when he scores, he goes nuts. He goes, any one of us scores, he's celebrating like it's his own goal. He's
all in.
Up. Yeah,
he's all in.
The Art Ross race is the last thing I want to talk about here.
You think Ovi's got a shot?
Well, if he keeps scoring 8 goals in 5 games, he might.
Nikita Kucherov doing everything for the Tampa Bay Lightning, 123 points. Nathan MacKinnon, another performance today, 122 points. He's only a point behind. Connor McDavid has clawed back after playing hurt and missing games at the start of the year. He's at 115 points. McDavid he's at 89 assists. He might hit 100. But what's going to happen in the Art Ross race? And do you think McDavid can or will hunt them down?
I think he might, which is crazy because what was it? In some point in mid to late November, he was near 100th in the league in scoring.
He wasn't on the first page of points in the NHL.
Yeah, his start and his whole team's start was so bad. The fact that he's even in the conversation is wild.
But man, the performances from Kucherov and MacKinnon, I'm still I'm an annoying person to talk to about the Hart. I'm McDavid's still the best player on the planet. When he was bad, look at what Edmonton was doing, and when he was back, not hurt anymore, look at what Edmonton's doing. I think he fulfills it's LeBron James in the NBA for his prime and his second prime and his third prime. As long as he's playing and healthy, he is the MVP. But Kucherov and MacKinnon will even make numpties like me pause this year based on what they're doing.
Well, let's put it this way. If you want to go by the definition of the Hart Trophy, since you brought that up, outside
you love that I brought that up.
I know, but just for something to think about, because I don't have a strong opinion on it right now. But name any other superstars on the Edmonton Oilers this year not named Connor McDavid.
Leon Draisaitl.
Could you make a case for Zach Hyman? Dude might score 50.
Yeah, not for Hart.
No, I'm just talking about
Zach
stars.
Hyman 50 goals is the funniest thing.
I'm just talking about players on these teams playing like stars.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, Colorado, outside of MacKinnon.
Yeah.
Rantanen, Makar. Okay, this year, Tampa.
That's
Well, he has 43 more points than the next person on his team.
If you're talking Hart, man,
he's going to run away with it. I agree.
It should be Kucherov.
Yeah.
And Tampa's in a playoff spot. Even their goalie hasn't been good this year.
In 69 games, nice. He's got 41 goals, 82 assists for 123 points. And then Brayden Point has 41 goals, 39 assists for 80 points. He has 43 more points than the next guy on his team.
That's
more points than most of the Red Wings.
The crazy thing about Kucherov to me, too, is you look at MacKinnon and McDavid, their skating ability, unbelievable. Like, you can just watch them and go, they are on a different planet. Kucherov, you see the short, stocky, little hairy Russian not moving around the ice particularly fast, not really doing anything that would pull you out of your seat. And then you look at the stat line at the end of the game. Oh, he had a goal and 3 assists.
We could see 200 assist players this year.
It's crazy.
This pains me to say, as a person who's a really big proponent of defense in this league, and I like to see good defense, but the increase in scoring in the NHL has been just so incredibly well timed, especially coming out of COVID and, you know, trying to keep up with the other major pro sports leagues. But this is exciting.
Oh, it's phenomenal. McDavid's 8 points back, and does anybody think he can't do it?
I still think he will. If you let me bet on it, I would.
You probably could.
It's a lot of work, and none of those companies sponsor us right now.
That's true. Yeah,
you guys know my rules.
But yeah, I don't know. It's good for the league. If you want to talk about growing the game, look at when the NBA and the NHL split in terms of popularity. The NBA is all about personalities, big names, superstars doing crazy things. This is what the NHL needs. And honestly, I don't think the NHL is embracing it enough. This should be on the homepage every day. This should be on every TikTok feed, Twitter feed, Instagram feed, daily updates on the Art Ross race.
But it's not on the league-owned or broadcasting-owned things. I keep going, and the reason why I am struggling to think Nikita Kucherov will win the Hart, and right now I think he should, is because voters are subjective, and people are going to go back to the All-Star game in Toronto and see how his give-a-crap meter was negative 100. He owned up to being the villain that weekend, and I think the league should be, really hammering into that. But that swayed some people, and, I think people are very much on Nathan MacKinnon deserves to win one of these eventually. So I really don't know where the voting's going to go on with this. If I had a vote, like just given the gap between Nikita Kucherov and Brayden Point in terms of points, it's got to be Kucherov for me.
Oh, and by the way, we haven't even mentioned the guy who might hit 70 goals this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're going to tell me Austin Matthews is going to score 70 and not win the Hart? Maybe.
He might not even be a finalist.
I just labeled myself as a McDavid is always the MVP person. And right now, if you made me vote and say, Ryan, be as objective as possible, throw away all of your preconceived notions.
Yeah, but
he's either third or fourth.
People don't vote people vote with bias.
Yeah, of course. But you also look at the stat that you just gave about the difference between Kucherov and if Tampa was in a divisional seed, the narrative might not be as strong. But they had to drag themselves back into a wild card spot. And by they, I mean Kucherov dragged them back into it. He checks all the boxes.
If a 70-goal scorer is a finalist, which I think would be.
Has to be.
And he plays in Toronto, so that is a big stick to be waving around in terms of votes and, bias. Who do you leave off then? MacKinnon or McDavid?
It's probably McDavid. I think McKinnon's going to win it. Not that I'm saying he doesn't deserve it. He's right there. But Matthews has his heart. McDavid has multiple hearts. Kucherov has his heart. We know the voters love the he's due storyline. The he's got to get one eventually storyline, which is BS. If you're never the best player in the world, you're never the best player in the world. Just accept it. But McKinnon's the only one of the guys in the race who doesn't have it, and he's only 1 point behind Kucherov. So it's not like, if Kucherov finishes with 145 and MacKinnon gets 132, okay, it'd be a little absurd to give it to him. But if he's only a point or two behind, or he still might pass him, he's going to get it.
This is going to be a fun end to the season. For Red Wings fans and across the league, you're right. This is it's not appreciated enough what we're seeing right now. most years, McDavid stays healthy. He runs away with the Art Ross, and a lot of these conversations are, but McDavid. But we're seeing a lot of it feels like this generation finally has all of its superstars firing at the same time, where you can see the kids who kind of grew up with this, they're going to talk about these players the same way we talked about, Yzerman, Sakic, or how people talked about Lemieux, Gretzky, that kind of thing.
Well, this is something that I saw pointed out on Twitter today, and it was a great point, and I hate that I forget who tweeted it, but on top of MacKinnon, Matthews, McDavid, Kucherov, this generation of superstars just going buck wild at the absolute best time. You know who else is having phenomenal years, or at least lately? Crosby and Ovechkin.
Yeah.
Your superstars have never been more marketable to whatever generation you want to pander to right now.
If this was like the year where Jamie Benn led the league, won an Art Ross, like where there wasn't a lot of standout players and Crosby was doing what he was doing, he'd be the Hart Trophy winner.
Yeah.
Like Crosby, he'll get votes, and it's almost a shame how far down the list he's going to have to be.
Yeah, he's not even going to be in the top 5. Like, there's not a thought of him being in the top 5.
The league's fun right now, man. The league's a lot of fun right now. Okay, we're going to jump into overtime on this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast. Overtime is brought to you by our Patreon supporters. Patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast if you want to join the Dub Club. The overtime bonus episodes, the Discord, and entry into all of our giveaways, including 2 tickets to every Red Wings home game. All of that and lots more. You allow us to continue to make the show bigger and better. You allow us to support the Jamie Daniels Foundation. And also you allow us to produce Expected by Whom, hosted by Prashanth Iyer and Sean Shapiro, which is back. Check it out wherever you get your podcasts. Or if you check it out on YouTube, it has now been moved to its own dedicated YouTube channel. So we'll put the link in the description. Go subscribe. We'd love to get them to 1,000 subscribers. Expected by Whom, hosted by Prashanth Iyer and Sean Shapiro. Okay, let's take some questions and comments from our patrons. Youper in the D says, many moons ago, an unlikely Red Wing started a fight with a guy named Forsberg. That video clip is still popular today. The Moritz Seider Filip Forsberg fight will live on as a standard fight clip forever, simply because of the magnificent aesthetics of Mo's flow. The question I have is, what percentage of our demise for the last month can be attributed to illness?
Not much, truthfully. I know the bug's been running through the room lately, and there's a strong chance I had it this week, and let me tell you.
Oh, so this is your fault is what you're saying.
It wasn't fun. Don't recommend. 0 out of 10.
Like admirable performance last episode.
Yeah, there was a couple moments where I thought I wasn't finishing the episode. Let's just say that. But this is fairly recent. It was a pretty prolonged stretch of where they were bad. So could there be a couple games in there where you could chalk it up to that? Yeah, absolutely. That was a pretty long streak, though.
The way those things move around, though, like it's not unheard of for it to affect your room for a couple of weeks. I'll say, like, how bad they were isn't justified purely by illness, but I'd say like a noticeable amount probably. Like, how many times did they not just start on time because they weren't ready mentally, and how many times did they not start on time because those guys were like had nothing in the tank?
So hard to say, right? Like things can lead you back to the reason why they won or did not, and in that case, we're not winning.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's tough to say, but maybe.
Red Feather Desert Dog says, how much NHL expansion would need to take place before relegation needs to be considered? Do you think such a concept would ever work in any North American major sports league?
I love the idea. I love the concept. It'll never happen until you have a second league. Like, if you want to bring back the WHA or something and have them as a feeder league, you could, because the AHL being a farm system doesn't really work for this format. You'd have to have an entirely separate league, which I don't think the NHL would want, because obviously they need their farm systems, they need their feeder leagues. But I love the idea because you want to talk about a way to prevent tanking.
Here's the reality. I'm a fan of a lot of different sports, and so I'm sad all the time. You know, the English Premier League, or like soccer or football, depending on what side of the pond you're on, they're not trending. Like, they're not ever going to get rid of it because it's so ingrained in their culture. Like, that's their religion. They're never going to get rid of relegation, that system. But the major teams are moving to a franchise model and a money model closer to the North American sports leagues. You see major conglomerates that own multiple leagues own major clubs, like, my team Liverpool is owned by the same team that owns the Boston Red Sox and the Pittsburgh Penguins, and they're expanding even further. These teams in like the major teams across all European soccer, for example, they have tried and will keep trying until they accomplish essentially, instead of the this tournament that all the teams from across Europe go into, where it's relegation and you have to earn your place in the standings and nothing's guaranteed, and you can have a random like Turkish team playing Manchester United in the semifinals. They essentially want to move to a model where they have like a super league where the biggest money clubs that draw in the most fans, the most revenues, that kind of thing, they're essentially baked into the tournament every time, no relegation, nothing. There was a lot of pushback, and I'm happy there was, but overall, we're seeing a lot more sports across the globe trend towards the North American model rather than the latter.
Well, as sports in general, or I guess life in general, gets more expensive, if you're slapping down multiple billions of dollars, you want to guarantee that you're going to be making this money back. And if you're one of the big dogs and you're worth billions of dollars and you are basically driving these leagues with their revenues, you want certain guarantees that you're going to be compensated accordingly. So I can understand totally why they think like that. That totally makes the other leagues very much feast or famine, or the other teams in those leagues feast or famine, because if they fall behind and get left behind, man, I really struggle to see how those professional teams would really be able to keep ramping up their revenue to stay as popular as they are. And we already had the conversation about the NHL and how they just go after the dumb money all the time. The NHL had relegation. I really struggled to see how they would be able to keep the Tier 2 league in people's eyes, especially as hockey is not the most popular sport in most of the cities it's played in.
A lot of franchises would have died.
Yes. Except for Arizona. They'd still be right there.
Never relegated.
Nope.
Yeah. All right, Frank the Tank says, when Wallman is healthy and ready to come back, what's your prediction on who comes out? And a lot of people actually ask about Edvinsson and does he stay up? Lars Thorzel asks the same thing. So what happens when Wallman's healthy and ready?
I know what everybody's yelling at their screen. Petrie comes out. Schrott pairs with Edvinsson. Wallman goes back to his spot. I will say, that is definitely what should happen. I have no idea.
Based on the, how far into the season we got with the lineup we've seen on defense, I'm with you, Brad. I fail to have the confidence to predict that Edvinsson will stay in. I think he should, and I think he's done enough to. And like, let's say they win against Washington and he's a factor. Like, I don't know what else you would have to see. We'll see, though. Mata had to step away from the game for an extended period of time last game, so is he banged up? I don't know, but we'll see.
Yeah, and every coach, even the best coaches in the league, have their blind spots. We've seen it time and time again. You go to any organization, a fan base will be yelling about why the hell does this coach love this guy? We just have to accept that's Jeff Petrie for the Detroit Red Wings right now.
Joseph Barry says, does missing the playoffs this season count as a total failure this season? No, I don't think it's a total failure. I think you can look at definitely points and think, they could have done things differently, or that part was a failure based on, that losing streak is never acceptable, even in a season where they're doing poorly. But total failure, no, I don't think that hinges on the playoffs. It'll certainly color how much of a success this season is, and you can still be disappointed if they don't make it, but I wouldn't call it a total failure. Podgy713 says, should we be worrying about DeBrincat at all? This feels like a longer than usual cold streak for him. Could it have anything to do with these dump and chase systems?
Doesn't help, but it also would help if he'd hit the net every once in a while, not to complicate things, but...
Yeah, that would help for sure.
I can't... you saw how I was hitting in the sim today. I can't make fun of how anyone hits a
Thank God
projectile.
those bays are wide.
He's cold. He's cold right now with the shooting. Some of it is, Larkin out, and some of it's the systems, but it's on DeBrincat at the end of the day. He's missing the net. He's not converting. He's generating offense. It's not like he's a black hole out there. Like, he still deserves to be in his position. But even for a streaky player, you need him to be less streaky than this.
There are alarming statistics about his 5-on-5 goal production, which are obviously alarming and need to be worked out. And I think people maybe forget that, it's still his first year on the Red Wings. I know there's a lot of churn in the lineup, but it's he's he's living somewhere new. He's playing on a new team, still getting up to pace, and I'd still say his season's been pretty good. So I don't think people need to totally label his season as a write-off at this point.
Join the Dark Sider says, how different do you think Stevie's offseason approach will be if we make the playoffs versus not? I know we're all hoping the losing skid was enough for some changes, but was it? I think the approach is going to be the same no matter what.
I'm curious because I could see a different approach depending on if they make the playoffs or not. We'll get into depth in the offseason. I still think there needs to be a quote-unquote step back in the offseason, at least a little bit in terms of a youth movement, because they need to get some of these guys up, and you can't have 5 of them over-ripening in Grand Rapids at one time. I question whether or not that will actually be a step back depending on who they're replacing, but I know the front office will view that as the more rookies you put in, the worse off you're going to be. Maybe it's coupled with a big move, big trade, big free agency signing. I don't know, what have you. I'm worried that if they miss the playoffs, they won't risk it, if that makes sense. They'll have the mindset of playoffs this season at all costs, which is usually a recipe to hinder your overall future, because teams that are scratching and clawing to get into 8th seed aren't making moves that are going to be conducive to winning a Stanley Cup in 5 years. So I'm not saying Yzerman's going to do that. He's usually made moves that make sense. You know, I still question maybe he started adding out of this rebuild a year too early, but that's nitpicking. Nobody's going to ever know if that was truly right or wrong. But I worry about little things like that swaying the mindset.
I think Yzerman, it's not a secret what the deficiencies are on this team, and I think he's already started to work on a lot of those things that he needs to correct, especially on defense. So that's why I have the mind. I understand what you're saying, Brad, but I think his approach is going to be the same kind of no matter what. Try to add a big player on offense. You think of what DeBrincat could do if you add a Gensel type to the top 6 and how that would slot guys in. Try to offload defensive contracts, because no matter what direction you go in, I think that the margins are on how much the youth movement is there. And that I can agree with you. It's a big question mark. What's he actually going to do? I don't know. And a lot of that you don't know until those guys come to camp too. But anyhow, off-season conversation. Last one here. Add Patch Curse of Perpetual Shame says, I've had several appointments with dentists in relation to a root canal, and I've been listening to episodes of the podcast in the chair. This last time, someone made me laugh and the dentist thought I was hurt. Somehow not even a dentist drill can compete with Brad.
You said laugh. Is that not a good thing?
No, it's a good thing. Credit to you. But I'm still going to do the joke of listening to you talk next to me is much the same as a dentist drill. I can't imagine having to deal with a root canal and Brad's takes at the same time. That's brutal. Anyhow, hope that feels better soon. All right. We're going to wrap up this episode of the Winged Wheel podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you to Labatt Blue Light for supporting the show and sponsoring this episode. And thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. We couldn't do this without you. Patreon.com/Winged Wheel podcast if you want to join the Dub Club. To our name level supporters, Arjun Shanker, Yves Bartels on behalf of the Sarah Grand Foundation, Aikfer, Samuel Soderholm, Icon, Brad's Lord and Savior, Bradley Cleveland, Glenn Brabham, Croner's Left Knee, Ashley Van Conant, Keenan O'Donohue, Yanni Burgers, Meals on Wheels, Matthew M. Rice, Mo Siders, Fight Card, Ad Patch Curse of Perpetual Shame, Admiral Matt S. of the Cheesebag Navy, Carl Brutina Nanaluski, Carl Provy, Citizen High Five, Clip Clop Nene, Connor Scovey, Craig Kibble, Denny's Gamer Girl, Derek Enstam, Dickens, Seider, formerly Marlon Winchester, DJ Denton, Fear the Goalie, God Creatives, Give Blood, Fight Probert, Have You Ever Drank Bailey's from a Shoe, Hockeytown Love, Hockeytown Matt, Hassam Al-Qassem, Jay Gollum, Jacob Turner, Joel Miranda, Jonathan Miller, Kalen Wood, Marcus, Matt Keeler, Matt McKay, Michael Edlund, R.A., Red Feather Desert Dogs, Ryan, 50 Handicap Hannah, Scott Martin, Skeletor, Scree and Lube, That's What I Appreciates About You, Wallman's Elite Dancing D, Iserplan Stan, General Andy Bohan of the Cheesebag Army, Sam Bankson, AB, Adam Rose, Axel Sandy Pelika, Bellingham, Acid Balls, Big Chungus, Brad Simmons, Brian Vasha, Chuck Buffchest, the Tarpless Goon, Commander Ben Barron of the Cheesebag Space Force, Connor Leighton, Corey Prida, Darren Fick, D-Boss Snip Show, Derek James, Frank Stanley, Gene Sullivan, Griffey Boy, insert clever hockey pun here, James Pridemore, Johnny Page, Jeremiah Dobo, JM Rhapsody, Jogan Rafferty Fan Club, John Evans Derogatory, John Ingalls, Josh Yelton, Kevin McCracken, Quaz, Les Grossman's Ungodly Firestorm, Linda Hull, Maximilian, Melissa Erickson, Michigan Boy in Avs Country, Ophelia, Red Wing Tar Heel, Shahid Syed, Steven, the Hodag, the Mexinadian, the Hat 123, Tom Iserplan Respecter, Wings fan in St. Louis, formerly Aaron, and your second favorite patron. Thank you all so much. We'll talk to you after Washington.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to check out wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find links to other ways to support the show, such as Patreon, official podcast apparel, and more. And don't forget to follow the show on Twitter at Winged Wheel Pod. And of course, the hosts at Brad Crisco, at Ryan Hanna WWP, and at Hockeytown Evan.